Hello all, it's me, Lorenzo di Piero de' Medici, and today I'd like to talk with you about a book that a friend gave me recently called The Prince. Now, The Prince is a treatise on how to govern, focusing on how a new ruler could maintain power, and suggestions of how to consolidate that new power. It takes a step away from traditional moral and religious values, and examines a way to govern a state based on historical rulers. It suggests that there is a morality in ruling that is separate from a personal morality. It looks to many famous ancient Roman rulers as a way to judge how one should and shouldn't currently rule. It covers topics ranging from how to acquire a new principality, to what persona one should have while ruling a principality, to who should be kept and avoided as advisors, and it has realistic and worthwhile advice about each of these topics. It emphasizes things like it is easier to be a ruler that is feared than a ruler that is liked. It uses less effort to make people consistently afraid of you than to make people consistently like you. It tells us that it is easier to be stingy than generous. If you aren't free with your wealth, then you may hold on to it for longer. Whereas if you give freely of your wealth, then people come to expect continued generosity. It points out that a realistic view should be admired in advisors as opposed to people who only tell you what you want to hear. It is the only way to truly know the state of your kingdom, and you can rest easier knowing that you will not be betrayed by one who tells you the truth. But how does this apply to here and now in early 16th century Florence and Italy? Well, as you may know, recently my uncle Giovanni became Pope Leo X, and we Medicis have become in control of the papal state and also in control of Florence. Now, the Prince provides us with a way to govern either of these places, and also how to incorporate them together. It shows us how to combine a state functioning like a monarchy, the papal state, and a free state governing itself, Florence. Examples of how to do this can be found in Chapter 3, New Conquests Added to Older States, in Chapter 5, Conquered Free States with Their Own Laws and Orders, and in Chapter 11, Ecclesiastical Principates. It gives us what we here in the 16th century Florence have been looking for, a way to unite the most powerful Italian states and a unified way to govern these states, each of which has a unique personality. In The Prince, we find a blueprint of how to succeed without relying on foreign influence, which has been plaguing Italy. Spain, France, and England have all invaded or invested in different states and families in an effort to control Italy and its politics. There are examples of how all of this can be achieved throughout the book, but specifically how we can rid ourselves of foreign influence is explicitly stated in Chapter 26, Exhortation to Seize Italy and to Free Her from the Barbarians. Now, if I could take a moment and look 500 years into the future and west to the New World, I'm sure that I could see the lasting impression of Machiavelli and the Prince. I could see it in how it removes much of the religious morality behind ruling and focuses on using history to show how to freely and effectively govern. I would bet the founding fathers of a new nation across the ocean would look to Machiavelli's The Prince for how to effectively govern their new republic. This book provides examples of how one could rule a democracy and still fight wars. It shows us how unpopular it is conscripting citizens and turning them into soldiers to fight wars. It instead suggests forming militias out of those citizens for domestic defense and hiring mercenaries for foreign wars. If I could see into that future, I would likely see this outcome play out during a Vietnam War, and how that republic's approach to wars or conflicts afterward incorporate Machiavelli's advice. I would likely also see how the government uses different sets of values when governing their own people, when handling foreign affairs, or when engaged in battle. So I guess the last question that I have to answer is, would I recommend this book? And the answer is yes. The Prince was the first of its kind to look away from a system of governing based on the prevailing religious morality, in this case Catholicism, and focus on a more objective and historically based system in examining the ancient Romans. It is also based on a realistic view of how civilization is actually organized and how one might truly be effective in governing their citizens, instead of focusing on the ideal of how one might govern a group of ideal people. At its heart, the Prince wants this ideal state to evolve from a more tyrannical one. It spends much of its time telling us how a new ruler can keep their power. And it also spends its time glowingly referring to the Republic, a system of governing which gives power to the people. It suggests arming these people and organizing militias so that they can protect themselves and thereby protect their ruler. And it suggests not wasting these citizens' lives on fighting a war abroad, but spending the state's wealth on hiring others to do it. Ruling involves both looking after the good and punishing the bad. It is good to have some historical context for how to do both. This book shows that there is a balance to ruling effectively. The advice given in The Prince on how to grasp and hold power as a ruler isn't explicitly immoral or moral. Machiavelli has just had the confidence to show that situations very often aren't the ideal, and therefore require a ruler with a balanced hand. And right now, in the 16th century, the balance of real to ideal happens to fall more toward the side of real.